The city smelled of rain and exhaust that night. New York had a way of swallowing people whole, especially the ones who were already standing on the edge. For Elena Rivera, the edge wasn't a metaphor. It was a daily reality. She stood outside the convenience store where she worked double shifts, the glow of the flickering neon sign casting tired shadows on her pale face. Her jacket was too thin for November, her shoes soaked from the drizzle, and the crumpled envelope in her hand was lighter than she'd hoped. Rent, overdue hospital bills, her younger brother's college tuition. Everything had been piling up like bricks on her chest. She checked the time. 11:52 p.m. Another late night, another week where hope felt like a luxury item she couldn't afford. Just as she was about to start walking toward the subway, a sleek black Cadillac Escalade pulled up by the curb. The tinted window slid down, revealing a man in a charcoal suit. He wasn't the kind of man who belonged on her street at this hour. His presence shifted the air, deliberate, silent, dangerous. "Elena Rivera?" he asked, his voice smooth but cold. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "Who's asking?" "My name's Marco. I represent someone interested in your services." He paused, scanning her face like a chess player studying his opponent. "Care to step in?" "It's warm." Every instinct in Elena screamed no. But when you're desperate, curiosity isn't a choice, it's survival. She hesitated for 3 seconds too long, and he opened the door for her. Inside, the car smelled of leather and faint cologne. The city lights blurred through the tinted glass as they drove. Marco handed her a manila envelope. Inside was a contract. She read the first few lines out loud. Personal caregiver, daily assistance, privacy and discretion required. A bro. The salary written at the bottom made her breath catch. $7,000 a month. Cash. More than she'd make in 6 months behind the register. "What's the catch?" she whispered. Marco smiled thinly. "You'll be working for a man who isn't like anyone you've ever met. He values loyalty, silence, and courage." She frowned. "What kind of care are we talking about?" He's in a wheelchair," Marco replied evenly. "Accident. You'll help with personal care, meals, bathing, things most people would find uncomfortable." Lena's heart thudded. She'd taken care of her grandmother for years. Bathing someone wasn't foreign. But doing it for a stranger, a dangerous one, for money this high, it was unsettling. "You don't have to decide now," Marco said. "But if you're interested, be at Eden Manor tomorrow. 9 a.m. Don't be late." Before she could respond, the car door opened, and she was back on the street, clutching the envelope like a lifeline and a curse all at once. The next morning, Eden Manor towered over the Hudson like a fortress disguised as a mansion. Iron gates, security cameras, men in suits patrolling the perimeter. Elena felt underdressed in her worn sweater and jeans. A woman in a black uniform led her inside. The house was cold, not physically but atmospherically, like it had secrets carved into its walls. And then she saw him. He sat in a sleek black wheelchair near the floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight outlining his sharp profile. Damian Moretti, though she didn't know his name yet. Early 30s, black hair slicked back, stubble shadowing his jaw. A scar curved along his temple like a whisper of violence. His eyes, dark, assessing, alive, locked onto hers the second she entered. For a moment she forgot to breathe. "So," he said slowly, his voice deep and smooth, with an edge that made her stomach tighten. "You're the one Marco found." She swallowed. "I got the offer, yes." Damian's gaze moved over her like he was cataloging every detail. "You're nervous." "Should I not be?" A low chuckle escaped him, surprising her. "Good answer." Elena's heart drummed like a warning in her chest as she stood in Damian Moretti's living room. It wasn't the kind of room that welcomed visitors. It observed them. Heavy velvet curtains filtered the morning light into muted gold. An old piano sat silent in the corner, its keys half hidden beneath dust. The walls were lined with oil paintings and bookshelves, but it was the people who made the room hum with quiet power. 2 suited men stationed near the entrance, a third by the hall. She'd walked into workplaces before. This was a territory. Damian wheeled himself closer, the faint sound of rubber against polished wood echoing between them. His presence was commanding without effort. He didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. Everything about him whispered, I own this space, and I see you completely. Sit, he said, gesturing toward the armchair across from him. His tone wasn't rude, just final. She sat. Marco stood to Damian's right, arms folded. She signed the NDA, he informed him quietly. She knows the salary and conditions. Damian nodded, then fixed his gaze on Elena. You can leave now if you want. No one's forcing you to stay. But if you stay... He leaned forward slightly, and for the first time she saw the glint of steel in his eyes. You follow my rules. No questions about business, no talking to outsiders, and absolute discretion. The air grew heavier. Elena's throat tightened. I'm not here to get involved in anything illegal, she said carefully. A hint of a smile tugged at his lips, not reaching his eyes. Good. I'm not hiring you for that. I just need assistance. The pause before assistance carried weight. Damian's expression softened slightly as he continued. I had an accident 3 months ago. Lost partial mobility. Some things I can't do alone anymore. Bathing, dressing, transferring from chair to bed. It's not something I enjoy relying on people for. His voice dipped on that last line, and for a split second the steel melted into something raw. Pride wounded by circumstance. Elena understood that feeling. Not the specifics, but the quiet humiliation of needing help. Her brother had needed her like that once. She nodded slowly. I can handle that. Abraham, you're sure? Damian's brow arched. This and hospital work, you'll see me at my weakest. Most people can't stomach that. She met his gaze. I've bathed someone before. I know what dignity means. Something flickered behind his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or curiosity. He gestured toward Marco. Show her the guest quarters. She starts tomorrow morning. The following day, the house woke early. Elena rose before dawn, nerves fluttering in her stomach like trapped birds. She changed into clean scrubs and tied her hair back, reminding herself, it's just a job. $7,000 a month. Hospital bills. Her brother. You can do this. When she entered Damian's room, she hesitated at the threshold. The space was surprisingly minimal. Dark wooden floors, neat furniture, a massive window overlooking the river. Damian sat by it, wearing a black t-shirt and gray sweatpants. His wheelchair angled toward the light. He looked almost peaceful until he turned to her. Good. You're on time, he said. Marco told me punctuality isn't your problem. Elena forced a small smile. I try. Damian's eyes scanned her, clinical but not cruel. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. What you're about to do isn't glamorous. You'll help me into the bathroom, then the chair. After that, I need someone steady. You think you can handle me falling? She swallowed. Yes, good. He wheeled himself to her. Then let's see what you've got. The bathroom was warm and smelled faintly of cedar. A special chair had been installed near the tub. Damian moved with practiced efficiency, but she could tell how much energy each transfer cost him. When she offered to steady his arm, he gave her a sharp look. Don't help unless I say so. She nodded. Understood. He maneuvered himself from the chair to the bench, one motion at a time, jaw tightening with effort. For a moment his hand slipped on the metal bar. Elena's instincts kicked in. She steadied him without thinking. His hand closed around her wrist, not harsh, but firm enough to send a jolt through her. I said, he murmured, his face inches from hers. Don't help unless I ask. Her breath hitched. His grip loosened after a second. Something unspoken passed between them. Not anger exactly. More like vulnerability disguised as command. I'm sorry, she whispered. I just didn't want you to fall. He exhaled slowly, as if calming some internal storm. I know. A beat passed. You can help me now. She supported his back as he slid fully onto the bench. His muscles were tense beneath her hands, strong despite the wheelchair. She avoided staring, focusing on the task, adjusting the chair height, making sure he was stable. But her heart was racing. It wasn't romantic, at least not yet, but there was an intimacy in being this close to someone's unguarded self. As the water ran, Damian leaned back, eyes closing for a moment. his usual guarded expression softened. She saw the man beneath the power, the one who'd been forced into vulnerability, and for reasons she couldn't explain, it tugged at her. "You're quieter than most people," he said suddenly, not opening his eyes. "I don't talk much when I work. Pretty good." His mouth curved faintly. "I hate chatter." Abraki, when they finished, she helped him back into his chair. This time he didn't bark instructions. Their movements found a rhythm. His lead, her support, a strange kind of trust forming in silence. As she wiped down the tiles afterward, Marco appeared at the door. "Boss," he said, "the shipment's delayed." Damian's expression changed instantly, steel snapping back into place. "Handle it," he said curtly, "no mistakes this time." Marco nodded and disappeared. The shift was subtle but chilling. The man in the wheelchair wasn't weak. He was dangerous, even sitting down. Elena pretended not to hear, focusing on folding towels, but her mind raced. Shipment. Boss. She'd suspected who he was, of course. A man with that house, that car, that security. This was Mafia territory. And now she was in the middle of it, up close. "Don't look so terrified," Damian said suddenly, catching her gaze. His tone was dry but not unkind. "If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have hired you." "I'm not terrified," she said too quickly. He tilted his head, amused. "You're a terrible liar." Despite herself, a small laugh escaped her. He smirked, satisfied with the crack in her armor. That night, as Elena lay in her small guest room, she replayed the day over and over. His hands gripping hers, his voice dropping low, the glimpse of his other life, the one humming beneath the surface. She told herself to keep her distance. This was temporary, just money. But as she closed her eyes, she remembered the way his expression had softened under the warm water. For the first time in months, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel in this house. Alive. The next few days unfolded in a rhythm neither of them had expected. Morning routines became a quiet dance of unspoken cues. Damian would wheel himself to the bathroom before she even knocked. She would prepare everything without asking. They rarely spoke during those hours, but the silence was thick with something that wasn't there before, a growing awareness. Elena found herself watching the way his jaw clenched when he transferred, the way he tried to hide the strain. He noticed the steadiness of her hands, the way she never flinched, never treated him like he was broken. On the fourth day, the rhythm cracked. Damian had a call that morning, one that turned his usual calm into ice. She entered the room to find him gripping the phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. "I don't care what it costs," he hissed. "If he talks, he disappears." Abrahi ended the call abruptly, then caught her standing there. For a heartbeat, neither moved. She should have looked away, pretended she hadn't heard. Instead, she met his gaze head-on. "Bad morning?" she said carefully. His mouth twitched, something between annoyance and amusement. "You have no idea." "I don't need to," she replied. "I just need to do my job." That answer seemed to disarm him. He wheeled toward the bathroom, muttering, "Fair enough," but his eyes lingered on her a moment longer than usual. That day, during the bathing routine, his hands trembled slightly. Not from weakness, rage. She steadied him when he moved, her palms firm against his back. For a second, their faces were inches apart. His breath was shallow. Her heart skipped. Neither said a word, but something shifted between them, a spark neither intended. That night, as she folded laundry in the guest quarters, Marco knocked on the door. "He wants to see you," he said flatly. Her stomach tightened. She followed him to the study. Damian sat behind a massive oak desk, papers scattered in controlled chaos. He gestured for her to sit without looking up. "Do you know why I hired you?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "Because I needed a job?" "Because I needed someone who wouldn't look at me like a tragedy," he said. His voice was low, steady. He lifted his eyes to hers, and for the first time she saw rawness there. "Every nurse they sent before you tiptoed around me like I'd shatter. You don't." She swallowed hard. "I just treat you like a person." "Exactly," he said softly. "That's why this works." Silence stretched between them, not awkward but weighted. She stood to leave, but he stopped her with one quiet line. "Don't ever lie to me, Elena. In this house, lies can get people killed." She froze. He wasn't threatening her. He was warning her. And yet, somehow, that made her trust him more. Days turned into weeks. She learned his patterns, the late-night phone calls, a breaky-breer, the way his eyes hardened when certain names came up, the way he sat by the window at dawn, like a king surveying a kingdom he could no longer walk through. And he learned hers, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous, the way she hummed under her breath while working, the way she avoided personal questions. One evening, after a particularly tense day, she found him in the garden. The air smelled of roses and rain. He was alone, wheelchair parked by the fountain, staring at the water like it held secrets. She almost turned back, but his voice stopped her. "Do you miss it?" She frowned. "Miss what?" "Whatever life you had before this place," he said without looking at her. She hesitated. "Sometimes. But missing it won't pay bills." He chuckled softly, a sound that startled her. "Practical. I like that about you." She walked closer. "Do you miss yours?" He finally looked up at her. His eyes were dark, tired, honest. "Every damn day." The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. She sat beside him on the low stone wall. Neither spoke for a while. The fountain filled the silence with gentle rhythm. It felt like a fragile truce between their worlds. Hers built on survival, his on power and loss. As the sun dipped, he said quietly, "You could leave, you know, take the money, disappear. You're not trapped here." She looked at him then, really looked. "Neither are you," she whispered. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue that night she couldn't sleep. His words lingered like a confession in the dark. She told herself not to get attached. He was dangerous. He was her boss. But when she closed her eyes, she saw him by the fountain. His guard lowered just enough for her to glimpse the man beneath the aubry, the golden light casting warm shadows across his face. He was sitting by the window, a blanket over his legs, a rare look of exhaustion softening his sharp edges. "You should rest," she said. "I've rested enough," he replied, but his voice lacked its usual force. She set the candle down on the table and sat across from him. Outside, the night stretched silent and heavy. "You're always carrying everything," she murmured, "even when no one's watching." He tilted his head slightly, intrigued. "You notice too much. Maybe you hide too little," she countered. For a heartbeat, he smiled, small and genuine. "No one's ever told me that." Then they weren't looking close enough, she said. The air thickened between them. She wasn't sure how they ended up talking for hours, but they did. He told her pieces of his childhood, nights spent in empty rooms while his father closed deals, how he learned to command fear before he understood kindness. She listened, really listened, Iberkey, and for once he didn't wear his armor. When the clock struck midnight, she stood to leave, but he stopped her. "Stay a little longer," he said. It wasn't an order, it was a request. She sat back down. Later that week, a rare warm day arrived. Marco suggested they all use the courtyard while the men worked on repairs. Elena brought Damian outside, wheeling him toward the sun. He closed his eyes, tilting his head back to feel the light on his skin. "I'd forgotten what this feels like," he said quietly. "It looks good on you," she teased. His eyes opened, locking on hers. "Careful, Elena." That sounded dangerously close to a compliment. She laughed, a soft, surprised sound that made his chest tighten. They spent the afternoon talking under the trees, drinking iced tea. At one point, a breeze blew a strand of hair into her face. He reached up without thinking and tucked it behind her ear. The gesture was simple, but her pulse stumbled. His fingers lingered for a fraction of a second too long. Neither of them acknowledged it, but neither forgot it either. Nights grew longer, and with them came quieter moments. She'd begun reading by his bedside while he reviewed papers, the sound of pages and pens filling the space like music. One night she finished a novel and let out a soft sigh. "What happens?" he asked. "They get their happy ending," she said. He leaned back in his chair. "I don't believe in those." "Maybe you just haven't lived yours yet," she replied. His eyes met hers, something unspoken hanging in the air. Slowly he reached for her book, flipping through the pages. "I used to read with my mother," he murmured, "before she died." Her breath caught. He rarely spoke about his family. "You miss her," she said softly. "Every day," he replied. She was the only softness in this house. When she was gone, everything changed. She placed her hand gently over his, not to comfort like a nurse, but like someone who understood. His hand didn't pull away. Instead, his thumb brushed against hers almost unconsciously. The moment was quiet, fragile, but real. The first snow of the season arrived unexpectedly. Marco and the men were away handling business, leaving the house unusually still. Elena walked through the hallways with a mug of hot chocolate, pausing by the window to watch flakes dance in the air. She didn't hear Damian approach until he spoke. "You look like you belong in another life," he said. She turned, startled, then smiled. "Maybe I do." He wheeled closer, his gaze steady. "Or maybe you belong exactly here." Her chest tightened. There was no teasing in his voice, no mask, just truth. She offered him the mug. "Try it." He raised an eyebrow but took a sip. His face softened with surprise. "This is good. I told you," she laughed. He passed it back to her, their fingers brushing. This time neither pretended not to notice. Later, as the snow piled outside, they sat together by the fireplace, talking in low voices. The flames painted their faces in warm gold. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Do you ever wish you could disappear from all of this?" He stared into the fire. "Every day. But men like me don't get to disappear." "Maybe you don't have to be like them," she said. His gaze flicked to her. "And who would I be then?" She held his eyes, unflinching. "Someone who chooses his own story." He didn't reply, but the way he looked at her made her heart race. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't expected. It was gentle. She let him. The warmth of his fingers wrapped around hers like a promise neither of them had spoken aloud. In that quiet room, with snow falling outside and fire crackling between them, the walls he'd built for years began to crack. And for the first time, Damian wasn't the Mafia boss, and Elena wasn't the caretaker. They were just two people, breathing the same fragile moment. The snowstorm deepened overnight, covering the entire estate in a silent white blanket. By morning the roads were blocked, the guards were stationed inside, and the house seemed isolated from the rest of the world. Elena woke early, wrapped in a sweater, and moved through the quiet corridors. She found Damian already awake in the sitting room, a book resting on his lap. He glanced up when she entered, his expression softening. "You're up early," he said. "Couldn't sleep," she replied, settling into the chair opposite him. "The snow makes everything feel too still." "I like it," he said. "For once, no one's calling. No one's demanding anything. Just silence." She watched him for a moment, noticing the way the morning light caught the edges of his hair, the faint shadow of tiredness beneath his eyes. He looked peaceful. "You look different when you're not carrying the world," she murmured. He gave a quiet laugh. "And what do I look like now?" "Like someone real," she said before she could stop herself. He didn't tease her this time. He simply held her gaze, something warm flickering in his eyes. After breakfast, they explored the grounds together. She pushed his wheelchair along the garden path, the snow crunching beneath their wheels and boots. The air was crisp, their breath visible. Damian pointed out places from his childhood, the tree he used to climb with Marco, the fountain where his mother taught him to read. His voice softened with each memory, and she listened like each word mattered. At one point they stopped by the frozen fountain. He stared at it for a long time. "She loved winter," he said quietly. "Said it made everything pure again." Elena knelt beside him, brushing snow from the edge of the fountain. She sounded kind. "She was," he replied, "too kind for this world." Without thinking, she reached up and touched his arm. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it made his throat tighten. He'd spent years being untouchable, unreachable. But here she was, reaching anyway. Later that afternoon the power flickered again. The generator struggled against the storm, and the house fell into a dim, golden half-light. Marco and the men were still snowed in at the outer post, leaving Elena and Damian mostly alone. They ended up in the library, where the fire crackled and the windows framed the falling snow. Damian sat near the fire while Elena browsed the shelves. "You have too many books you haven't read," she teased. "I didn't collect them for myself," he replied. "My mother filled these shelves. She wanted me to learn everything the world could offer." "And did you?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "No, I learned how to survive instead." She handed him a novel, the spine worn from years of love. Then maybe it's time to start again. He accepted it, flipping through the pages. Will you read it to me? The question caught her off guard. Sure. She settled into the chair beside him and began to read. Her voice filled the room, soft and steady. As the story unfolded, he closed his eyes, not from boredom, but to memorize the sound. No one had read to him since he was a boy. Hours slipped by unnoticed. At some point she lowered the book and realized he'd been watching her. Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air, slow and inevitable. "What?" she asked, suddenly shy. "Nothing," he murmured. "I just like listening to you." Her heart stuttered at the simplicity of it. She looked away, pretending to focus on the book, but the warmth in her chest refused to fade. Night arrived quietly. The storm still raged outside, but inside, the house felt cocooned. Elena prepared dinner, and Damian joined her in the kitchen. He insisted on chopping vegetables, despite the awkwardness of working from his wheelchair. "You're terrible at this," she laughed as he mangled a carrot. "I'm used to giving orders, not following them," he replied. "Well, in this kitchen, I'm the boss," she declared. He raised an eyebrow, amused. "Is that so?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Now hand me that knife before you hurt yourself." He obeyed with mock seriousness, and for a few minutes they cooked together like two ordinary people. No danger, no walls, just laughter and warmth. When they finally sat down to eat, candlelight flickered between them, casting shadows that made the moment feel almost unreal. "I can't remember the last time I laughed like that," he admitted. "Maybe you should do it more often," she said. He looked at her across the table, something unguarded in his expression. "You make it easy." Her chest tightened. She wanted to respond, but words failed her. Instead, she reached across the table, and he met her halfway. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like it had always been meant to happen. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, their world had narrowed to this shared warmth. Later, by the fire again, she wrapped a blanket around his shoulders and sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. The flames crackled, the snow fell, and their hands remained intertwined beneath the blanket. He turned his head slightly toward her. "Elena?" he said softly. "Yeah?" "Fibri, you make me forget who I am," he confessed. She inhaled slowly. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." He stared at her like he was trying to memorize every detail. The curve of her smile, the way the firelight danced in her eyes. Slowly, he raised his hand and touched her cheek. She didn't pull away. His touch was careful, almost reverent. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. For a moment the world held its breath. He didn't kiss her. Neither moved closer. But in that suspended silence, something between them solidified. Something real. Something dangerous. Something they could no longer ignore. The storm finally cleared by morning, leaving the estate wrapped in a fragile white silence. But peace never lasted long here. As the men returned from the outer posts, tension followed like a shadow. Elena sensed it the moment Marco stepped inside, snow clinging to his coat, his face grim. Damian wheeled into the foyer to meet him. "What happened?" he demanded. Marco handed him a folder, intercepted chatter. Someone leaked the location of the southern shipment. They knew every detail. Damian's expression darkened. "Inside job," he muttered. Elena stood nearby, holding a tray of coffee she'd brought for the guards, but her attention was fixed on him. His entire presence shifted, from the man who'd sat by the fire with her to the cold strategist who commanded fear. Later, in his study, he spread out maps and documents across the table. "It's someone close," he said quietly. "Someone who's been here long enough to know the routes." Marco nodded. "I've narrowed it to 3. Damian's gaze lifted to Elena briefly, softening for a heartbeat before hardening again. "Lock everything down," he ordered. The house became a fortress overnight. Guards patrolled every hallway, doors were reinforced, and no one entered without clearance. Elena tried to stay out of the way, but Damian kept her close, insisting she remain in the main quarters. "It's safer near me," he said simply, leaving no room for argument. She didn't fully understand the world she'd stepped into, but she understood danger when it was near, and it was circling them now. That night, Damian sat in his room, shoulders tense, eyes distant. She entered quietly, carrying tea. "You've been staring at that map for hours," she said gently. "If I stare long enough, maybe the traitor will appear," he replied dryly. She set the cup down beside him. "You can't solve everything by yourself." His eyes flicked toward her, and something in his expression softened. "You sound like her," he murmured. "Who?" "My mother," he said. "She used to say the same thing when I tried to fix everything alone." She smiled faintly. She was probably right. She usually was, he said, his voice quieter. She sat beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his body. "You don't have to carry this alone, Damian," she said. He exhaled slowly, a rare crack in his composure. "I don't know how not to." Her hand brushed against his on the armrest. He didn't move away. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was intimate. A sudden commotion outside broke it. Shouts echoed through the hall. Damian's head snapped up. "Stay here," he ordered, already wheeling toward the door. "Damian, wait," she began, but he was gone before she could finish. She followed anyway, heart pounding. Down the corridor, 2 guards dragged a man struggling violently. "Found him trying to access the east gate," one of them shouted. Damian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Stop." The guards froze. Damian wheeled closer, his presence commanding. "Who sent you?" The man spat on the floor, defiant. "You'll find out soon enough." Damian's jaw tightened. "Take him to the cellar. I'll deal with him later." Elena stood at the edge of the scene, her pulse racing. She'd known danger existed here, but seeing it this close sent a chill through her. Later, in the quiet of his room, he found her by the window, staring at the snow. "You shouldn't have followed," he said softly. "I couldn't just sit there," she replied. "I needed to know you were safe." Something in his eyes flickered at her words. He wheeled closer, stopping just beside her. "Elena," he said slowly, like he was testing the weight of her name. She turned to face him, and the world outside disappeared. "Every day you stay here, you're pulled deeper into my world," he warned. "And it's a world that doesn't forgive weakness." "Then maybe I'll learn to be strong," she whispered. He stared at her for a long time, searching her face for hesitation. There was none. He reached for her hand, and when she gave it, his grip tightened like an unspoken vow. "You're playing with fire," he said. "So are you," she replied. That night, she stayed in the adjoining room for safety, but neither of them slept. She lay awake, listening to the quiet creaks of the house, knowing he was awake on the other side of the wall. Just before dawn, a noise shattered the silence, a distant explosion. The walls trembled. Alarms blared through the estate. She bolted upright. Damian's door flew open almost simultaneously. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Guards rushed through the halls. "Perimeter breach!" someone shouted. Damian wheeled forward, every inch of him transformed into the leader he was born to be. She followed, her fear sharp but controlled. Smoke drifted through the corridor from the far side of the house. "It's the east wing," Marco shouted, emerging from the chaos. "Diversion attack!" Damian's eyes narrowed. "Then the real hit is coming from the back," he said. His instincts were terrifyingly precise. Gunfire cracked outside. Elena's hand shook, but she stayed close, refusing to retreat. Damian glanced at her briefly, an unspoken question in his eyes. She met it with silent determination. Amid the chaos, their connection anchored them. In a world spinning out of control, they moved like 2 parts of the same decision. Danger closing in, Paria House erupted into chaos. Alarms wailed, boots thundered down the halls, and distant gunfire split the cold morning air. Damian's men moved like a well-oiled machine, but this attack was different. Coordinated, precise. Someone on the inside had given them everything. Damian positioned himself near the control room, issuing orders with the calm sharpness of a commander. Elena stayed close, her pulse hammering in her throat. She wasn't trained for this world, but something inside her refused to hide. "East and west wings are compromised," Marco shouted over the noise. "We've got movement near the garage." Damian's eyes flashed. "They're trying to cut off escape routes. Seal the back corridors. Move the secondary unit to the south wall." His voice cut through the panic like steel. A sudden explosion shook the floor beneath them. Dust rained from the ceiling. Elena stumbled, and Damian reached out instinctively, steadying her. For a brief second their hands locked, grounding each other. "Stay with me," he said, his voice low but firm. "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, breathless. Gunshots echoed closer now. The attackers were inside. Marco burst into the room, face tense. "They're in the main hall," he said. "We've lost 2 guards already." Damian's jaw tightened. "Get Elena to the panic room," he ordered. "No," she said immediately. "I'm not leaving you. Elena," he warned, his voice carrying the weight of command. She met his gaze without flinching. "I won't hide while you fight for your life." For a moment, something raw flickered across his face. Fear, not for himself, but for her. "Then stay behind me," he said quietly. Together, they moved toward the heart of the chaos. The grand hall was a battlefield. Broken glass, smoke, bodies moving in shadows. Damian directed his men with precision, every order pushing the attackers back inch by inch. But the enemy was relentless. A gunman appeared on the balcony, aiming straight for Damian. Without thinking, Elena lunged, shoving him out of the line of fire. A shot cracked, splintering the wall behind them. Damian spun, firing back, taking the man down. His heart slammed against his ribs. He turned to her, furious and terrified all at once. "Are you insane? You're welcome," she shot back, breathless. The heat in his eyes wasn't just anger, it was something far more dangerous. "Don't ever do that again," he said, his voice shaking. "Then stop making yourself a target," she whispered. The battle raged on. Slowly, Damian's men began to regain control. The attackers were skilled, but they hadn't anticipated Damian's ruthlessness. When the last shot faded, silence fell heavy over the hall. Smoke curled upward. The floor was littered with shell casings. Marco gave the all clear. "We've secured the perimeter. Survivors are being interrogated." Damian sat back in his chair, breathing hard, adrenaline still humming through him. Elena knelt beside him, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice betrayed exhaustion. "You're shaking," she whispered. He looked down and saw his own hands trembling slightly. "It's been a while since it got this close," he admitted. She placed her hands over his, steadying them. "You're not alone anymore," she said softly. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time, not as a caretaker, not as someone caught in his world by accident, but as someone who chose to stand beside him. Marco approached, holding a folder. "We found this on one of the bodies," he said. Damian opened it, his expression darkening as he scanned the contents. "It's worse than I thought," he muttered. "They knew our movements for weeks. Someone inside has been feeding them everything." Elena's stomach tightened. "Who? I don't know yet," he said. "But I'll find out." Hours later, after the bodies were cleared and the men reorganized, the house fell into uneasy silence. Elena found Damian in the library, staring into the dying embers of the fire. His shoulders were rigid, his face unreadable. She approached quietly. "You won," she said softly. "For now," he replied. "But this isn't over." She hesitated, then sat beside him. "Neither is what's between us," she whispered. His head turned sharply, eyes locking on hers. There was no more pretending, no more careful distance. Slowly he reached out, fingers brushing against her cheek. She didn't pull away. "You should have run when you had the chance," he murmured. "Maybe," she said, "but then I wouldn't be here." He exhaled shakily, as if releasing a truth he'd been holding too long. "You make me weak," he said. "No," she replied. "I make you human." Brief the words hung between them, fragile and undeniable. Then, slowly, he leaned closer. Their foreheads touched first, a quiet, trembling moment suspended in the firelight. No grand declarations, just 2 people who had bled, fought, and survived side by side. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. Inside, for the first time in years, Damian let the walls around his heart crack wide open. Elena closed her eyes, leaning into him, knowing that danger still lingered beyond these walls. But in this moment, they were no longer alone. Their bond had been forged in fire and fear, and something told her this was only the beginning.